Keanu Reeves had always been a symbol of comfort to Emma, and as she sat in the dimly lit corner of the orphanage, clutching a faded photograph of her parents, her tiny fingers tracing their smiling faces, she longed for the warmth of those nights spent watching his movies with them. She still remembered the way her father used to playfully reenact fight scenes from The Matrix, tumbling around the living room as her mother laughed. The three of them would curl up on the couch, eating popcorn, watching Keanu Reeves in their favorite movies. Keanu was more than just an actor to Emma. He was a connection to the love she had lost. That night, Emma overheard something that made her heart race. "Keanu Reeves will be in town this weekend," one of the caregivers said. "It's a charity event. He always takes time for his fans." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Keanu Reeves. Her Keanu Reeves. A seed of hope sprouted inside her, something she hadn't felt in so long. Maybe if she could see him, even just for a moment, it would bring back some of the warmth she had lost. When she asked to go, Mrs. Thompson, the head caregiver, gave a firm no. "It's too dangerous, Emma. We can't take you out like that." That night, as the moon cast eerie shadows across the orphanage walls, Emma made a decision. If no one was going to help her, she would do it alone. She packed a small backpack, her treasured photo, a bottle of water, a granola bar, and slipped out through the window. The city at night was a terrifying place for a 9-year-old girl, but her heart pounded with determination. Streetlights flickered above her as she navigated through unfamiliar roads, her tiny feet aching from the long walk. After what felt like an eternity, she finally arrived. The event venue was ablaze with light, a crowd buzzing with excitement. This is it, she thought, weaving her way through the sea of people, trying to get as close as possible. Then, the unthinkable happened. "Unfortunately," the announcer's voice rang out, "Keanu Reeves will not be attending tonight due to unforeseen circumstances." Emma's world stopped. The crowd groaned in disappointment, but to Emma it wasn't just a missed event. It was her last hope slipping away. Tears streamed down her face as she backed away from the crowd, her tiny hands trembling. The crushing loneliness returned with full force. Why did I even come? Why did I think this would change anything? As she walked aimlessly through the streets, barely able to see through her tears, she turned into a narrow alleyway. And that's when she saw him. A man in a cap and dark clothes, walking quickly, trying to stay unnoticed. Her heart skipped a beat. She squinted through her tears. It was him, Keanu Reeves. For a second, she thought she might be imagining it. But then he turned slightly, and there was no mistaking those kind eyes. Without thinking, she ran toward him. "Keanu!" she cried. "Keanu Reeves!" The actor stopped abruptly, startled. He turned, his gaze meeting hers. The actor stopped abruptly, startled. "Hey, little one," he said gently. "Are you okay? Why are you out here alone?" Emma's emotions burst like a dam. She told him everything, the accident, the orphanage, how his movies were the last happy memories she had with her parents. Keanu knelt to her level, listening intently. When she finished, he exhaled deeply. "I'm so sorry, Emma. That's a lot for such a brave girl to carry." Emma wiped at her eyes. "You're the only thing that makes me remember them." Keanu was visibly moved. He reached out, resting a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Your parents would be so proud of you." Just as he spoke, Keanu noticed something. Emma's small hands were trembling, her face growing pale. "Emma?" he asked, concern flashing in his eyes. "Are you okay?" Emma swayed slightly. I don't feel well." And then, before Keanu could react, she collapsed. Keanu caught Emma just in time, her small body limp in his arms. His heart pounded in a way it hadn't in years. She was barely conscious, her breath shallow and uneven. "Emma, stay with me," he urged, gently tapping her cheek. Her lips parted as if to say something, but only a weak whisper came out. "I'm sorry." The word hit him hard. No child should ever feel the need to apologize for needing help. His instincts kicked in. This wasn't just exhaustion. Something was very wrong. Looking around, Keanu realized they were still deep in the alleyway, away from the main roads. The streetlights flickered above them, casting long, eerie shadows on the brick walls. The streets were empty, and there was no one in sight. He had no choice. He had to act fast. Lifting her gently in his arms, he started walking toward the nearest road, scanning for a cab or someone who could help. His assistant had left earlier, assuming Keanu had safely exited the venue. There was no one but him and this little girl, who had somehow found him against all odds. As he stepped out of the alley and onto a better-lit street, Emma stirred slightly, her head resting against his chest. "I left it at the orphanage," she mumbled weakly. "Left what?" he asked, quickening his pace. "My insulin." His heart clenched. Diabetes. She needed her medication, and he had no idea how much time she had before things got worse. He flagged down the first car he saw. A black sedan rolled to a stop, the driver, a middle-aged woman, rolling down her window. "Oh my God! Keanu Reeves?" she stammered, eyes wide. "I need your help," Keanu said quickly. "This girl's in trouble. Can you drive us to the hospital?" The woman hesitated for half a second before unlocking the doors. "Get in! Get in!" Keanu climbed into the back seat, cradling Emma in his arms. "Hold on, kid. We're getting you help." The woman sped through the city streets, running a few red lights in her urgency. "Is she your daughter?" she asked breathlessly. "No," Keanu answered. "But she needs help. Fast." Emma stirred slightly, her head rolling against his chest. Her skin was cold. Keanu could feel her little fingers barely gripping his jacket. The car skidded to a halt in front of the emergency entrance of the hospital. Keanu burst out of the car, Emma still in his arms. "She's diabetic! She needs immediate care!" he shouted as he ran through the automatic doors. A team of nurses and doctors rushed toward him. "Sir, please, put her on the stretcher." Reluctantly, Keanu laid Emma down. Her small frame looked even smaller under the harsh fluorescent lights. As they wheeled her away, a nurse held up a clipboard. "Sir, are you family?" Keanu clenched his jaw. "No, but she has no one here. Can I stay?" The nurse hesitated but saw the look in his eyes. "All right. Wait here." As they disappeared through the emergency doors, Keanu exhaled heavily and ran a hand through his hair. The weight in his chest was unbearable. He had faced tragedies before, personal losses that had left scars too deep to heal. But tonight, something felt different. He had to do more. His hands balled into fists as he pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Find out where this girl came from. I need the name of the orphanage, and I need it now." Minutes felt like hours. Keanu paced the waiting room, his mind racing with thoughts of what would have happened if he hadn't been there. A 9-year-old girl alone in the city, suffering like this. Then, finally, a doctor emerged. "He's stable," he announced, pulling off his gloves. "We managed to get her blood sugar back to normal. She's awake, but weak." Keanu let out a breath of relief. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "She's been asking for you." Keanu hurried down the hall and stepped into the room. Emma lay in the hospital bed, looking up at him with tired, glassy eyes. "You stayed?" she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu pulled up a chair beside her and took her small hand in his. "Of course I did." Her fingers weakly curled around his. I thought I was going to be alone again." His chest tightened. "Not tonight," he promised. "Not ever again." Emma blinked up at him, her tiny body exhausted from the ordeal. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Keanu frowned. "What do you mean?" "When I called your name," she whispered. "You could have kept walking. You didn't have to stop. You didn't have to help me." Keanu took a deep breath, then brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead. "Because I heard something in your voice," he said. "Something I know too well." Emma tilted her head slightly. "Loneliness," Keanu continued. "Loss. I've been there, Emma. And when I saw you, I knew I couldn't just walk away." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were something else. Something warmer. Keanu sat with her for hours, talking softly, telling her stories of his own childhood, his own struggles. Then, as dawn began to break through the hospital windows, Emma looked at him and said something that nearly broke him. "I wish you were my dad." Keanu froze. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His heart twisted in a way he hadn't expected. Emma's eyes fluttered shut as exhaustion overtook her, but her small fingers still clung to his hand. Keanu sat there for a long time, watching over her as she slept, knowing deep in his heart that meeting her had changed something inside of him forever. And then, in that quiet hospital room, Keanu made a silent vow. This little girl would never be alone again. Keanu sat in the hospital chair, watching the slow rise and fall of Emma's chest as she slept. The quiet hum of the machines monitoring her vitals filled the space, but his mind was restless. He had been in countless places, met thousands of people, but never had someone so small, so vulnerable, made such an impact on him. His fingers drummed lightly against the armrest as he thought about what to do next. He had promised her that she wouldn't be alone, but what did that truly mean? He wasn't a guardian, wasn't a father. Yet the thought of leaving her here, of letting her go back to a cold and lifeless orphanage, made his stomach tighten. His assistant, who had arrived a short while ago, stood quietly near the doorway. "Keanu," she said softly, not wanting to wake the sleeping girl. "I spoke with the orphanage. They confirmed she's been there since her parents passed. She doesn't have any relatives willing to take her in." Keanu let out a long breath, his hand running through his hair. "She told me she has trouble getting adopted because of her condition." His assistant nodded. "That's true. Families often hesitate when there are ongoing medical costs. It's heartbreaking." Keanu stared at Emma, his heart tightening again. Money. It always came down to money. Something so trivial to him was the reason this little girl had to suffer, had to feel unwanted. "She told me she wished I was her dad," Keanu said, almost absent-mindedly. His assistant blinked, surprised by the statement. "What did you say?" she asked. "I didn't know what to say," he admitted. "But I know I can't just walk away." His assistant hesitated. "Are you saying you want to adopt her?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. It was a heavy decision, one that would change both their lives forever. He wasn't a stranger to tragedy, but was he ready for something like this? Before he could say anything, a soft voice cut through the silence. "You don't have to," Emma whispered, her eyes fluttering open. Keanu turned to her, surprised. "We mean?" Emma licked her dry lips, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to be my dad. I just don't want to be forgotten." The way she said it shattered something inside of him. "You won't be," Keanu promised. "I won't let that happen." Emma gave a weak smile. "Okay." The next morning, Mrs. Thompson from the orphanage arrived at the hospital. She had a weary expression, the kind that spoke of years of experience in seeing children come and go, many of whom never found a home. Keanu wasted no time. "I want to set up a permanent fund to cover all of Emma's medical expenses. I don't want this to ever be a reason she's overlooked again." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened. "Mr. Reeves, that's an incredibly generous offer, but—" "I don't want there to be a but," Keanu interrupted. "She deserves a real chance. If money is the issue, let's remove it." Mrs. Thompson looked at Emma, who sat up in bed, blinking in disbelief. "Emma, did you hear that?" she asked softly. Emma nodded slowly. "You really mean it?" Keanu leaned forward. "Of course I do." Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. She nodded, wiping them away quickly, as if afraid the moment might disappear if she let herself believe it too much. Keanu wasn't done. "I also want to find her a home, a real one." Mrs. Thompson sighed. "That's easier said than done. Many families look for babies or young children without medical complications." Keanu clenched his jaw. "Then I'll help, however I can." Emma watched the conversation, processing everything. "Does this mean I'll have a family?" she asked hesitantly. Mrs. Thompson smiled, placing a hand over hers. "It means we're going to try harder than ever before to find you the perfect one." Keanu looked at Emma and made another promise. "And until we do, I'll be here." The next few days passed quickly. Emma regained her strength, and Keanu spent as much time as possible with her. They talked about movies, about dreams, about what she wanted in a family. "I don't care if they're rich or if they have a big house," Emma said one evening. "I just want them to be kind." "That's a good wish," Keanu said softly. And we're going to make it come true. Meanwhile, news of Keanu's act of kindness spread. The media caught wind of the story, a young orphan girl who had snuck out to meet her favorite actor, only to have him step in to change her life. Offers to adopt Emma began pouring in, but not all of them were genuine. Mrs. Thompson spent hours sifting through applications, rejecting ones that seemed more interested in the publicity than the child herself. Then finally, a family came forward, a woman named Sarah and her husband Tom. They weren't wealthy, but they were kind. They had always wanted to adopt but had been hesitant about the financial burden of medical care. Now, with Keanu's fund covering that, they had no reason to hesitate. Keanu met them personally before giving his approval. He sat across from them in a quiet room at the orphanage, studying them carefully. "This isn't just about doing a good deed," he said seriously. "Emma needs more than a home. She needs love, stability, someone who won't leave." Sarah nodded. "We understand. We've wanted to be parents for so long, and when we read about Emma, something just felt right. We don't care about the diabetes. We just want her to be happy." Keanu watched them for a long moment before finally nodding. "Okay," he said. "Then let's give her the family she deserves." The day Emma met Sarah and Tom for the first time, she was quiet, hesitant. She had been disappointed so many times before, but the moment Sarah knelt to her level and said, "Hi Emma, we're so happy to meet you," something in Emma's eyes softened. "You are?" she asked. Tom handed her a small teddy bear. "We got this for you. His name is Charlie." Emma took the bear, staring at it for a moment before whispering, "Thank you." Keanu stood nearby, watching with a hopeful heart. A few weeks later, Emma left the orphanage for good. She had a real home now, a family, people who would love her for who she was. On her last night at the orphanage, Keanu visited her. "Are you ready for your new adventure?" he asked. Emma nodded. "I think so." She hesitated, then threw her arms around him. "Thank you, Keanu." Keanu hugged her back, closing his eyes for a brief moment. "No, kid. Thank you." As Emma walked toward her new family, she turned back one last time. "Will I see you again?" Keanu smiled. "Count on it." And with that, Emma stepped into her future, carrying with her a teddy bear named Charlie and a heart full of hope. Emma sat in the back seat of Sarah and Tom's car, gripping the small teddy bear in her lap. The city lights blurred past the window as they drove toward her new home. She had never been to their house before, but they had described it to her. A small, cozy place with a garden out back and a bedroom that was now hers. For the first time in a long time, she had something of her own. Yet as the car moved farther and farther away from the orphanage and the hospital, a strange feeling settled in her chest. Excitement? Fear? She wasn't sure. She glanced at Sarah, who was looking at her through the rearview mirror with a gentle smile. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." But was she? She wanted to be happy. She wanted to believe this was real. But after so many letdowns, it was hard to trust that this wasn't temporary, that they wouldn't change their minds. The car turned onto a quiet street lined with trees. The houses were small, but warm-looking, with porches and flower beds. Then, the car slowed to a stop in front of a blue house with white shutters. "We're home," Tom said. "Home." The word felt foreign in Emma's mind. Sarah and Tom led her inside, and she took slow, cautious steps through the doorway. The smell of cinnamon filled the air. The walls were decorated with framed pictures, smiling faces, happy memories. It was a place filled with love. And yet, Emma felt like an outsider, like a visitor passing through. "Come see your room," Sarah said gently. Emma followed them up the stairs. When Sarah pushed open the door at the end of the hall, Emma stepped inside and gasped. The walls were painted a soft yellow. A small bookshelf sat by the window, already filled with books. There was a bed with a blue comforter, and above it, a framed picture of a night sky with tiny golden stars. She took a step inside, her fingers brushing over the edge of the bed. "That was mine. This is mine. Everything in here." Emma turned to them, searching their faces for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was warmth. "We want you to be happy here," Sarah said, "to feel safe." Emma swallowed hard and nodded. "Thank you." She didn't know what else to say. Words felt too small for what she was feeling. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the teddy bear clutched to her chest. She was in a new home, with people who said they wanted her, but the fear still lingered. Would they get tired of her? Would they send her back? She closed her eyes and made a silent promise to herself. Don't get too comfortable. Don't let yourself believe this is forever. Days passed, and Emma adjusted to her new life, slowly but cautiously. She went to school, sat at the dinner table with Sarah and Tom, helped in the garden on weekends. But no matter how kind they were, she kept her heart guarded. She didn't want to hurt again. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. She had just come home from school when she heard Sarah on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, I'll let her know, thank you so much." When Sarah hung up, she turned to Emma with an excited smile. "That was Keanu's assistant. He's coming to visit you this weekend." Emma's heart nearly stopped. "What?" "He said he promised you he'd see you again." "He's keeping that promise." Emma didn't know what to say. She had thought maybe, just maybe, Keanu would forget about her. After all, he was a big star, always traveling, always busy. But he hadn't. He was coming. That Saturday, Emma stood by the front door, shifting nervously from foot to foot. She had picked out her favorite sweater, the one that made her feel safe. Tom and Sarah stood beside her, smiling reassuringly. Then, a sleek black car pulled up outside. The door opened, and there he was. Keanu Reeves stepped out, wearing his usual simple outfit, dark jeans, a jacket, and those kind eyes that had seen too much of the world yet still held so much warmth. Emma's breath caught. He was really here. Keanu grinned when he saw her. "Hey, kid." Emma ran to him, and he caught her in a hug, lifting her slightly off the ground. "You came," she whispered. "I told you I would." As he set her down, Sarah and Tom stepped forward. "It's nice to finally meet you in person," Sarah said warmly. Keanu shook their hands. "Thank you for taking such good care of her." "She's been taking care of us just as much," Tom said with a chuckle. "She's got a stubborn streak, you know." Keanu laughed. "Yeah, I figured that out pretty fast." They all went inside, and Keanu spent the afternoon with Emma. They talked, played a board game, and even watched one of his old movies together. It felt like old times, like when she used to sit on the couch with her parents, laughing at his movies. As the evening approached, Keanu sat with her in the backyard, under the fading sunlight. "You seem happy," he said. Emma nodded. "I think I am." Keanu looked at her for a long moment, but, Emma hesitated. I don't want them to change their minds." Keanu frowned. "Emma, listen to me. They chose you, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They're not going anywhere." Emma bit her lip. "You promise?" Keanu smiled. "I promise." She believed him. As the night came to an end, Keanu knelt in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've got a good life ahead of you, Emma. Hold on to it." Emma nodded. "Will I see you again?" Keanu's smile was gentle. "Always." And with that he left. But this time, Emma didn't feel abandoned. She felt whole. She walked back inside where Sarah and Tom were waiting. "Ready for dinner?" Tom asked. Emma looked around the house. The warm kitchen, the smell of home-cooked food, the laughter that filled the space. She nodded. "Yes, I'm home." As Emma walked back inside the house, the warmth of her new home surrounded her, but something inside her still felt fragile. Even with Keanu's visit reassuring her that she wasn't alone, old fears lingered in the corners of her mind. Would this happiness last? Could she trust it? That night she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The stars in the framed picture above her bed shimmered faintly in the moonlight filtering through the window. A quiet breeze rustled outside, making the curtains dance. She turned on her side and reached for the small stuffed bear Keanu had given her. Clutching it to her chest, she let out a deep breath. She was safe. She had a family now. And yet, the fear of losing it all gripped her tightly. In the following weeks, Emma tried to settle fully into her new life. Sarah and Tom did everything they could to make her feel at home. They never pushed her to open up, but but always made sure she knew she was wanted. Every day, they reminded her through their actions, making her favorite breakfast, asking about her day, tucking her in at night. But Emma couldn't shake the thought that maybe she wasn't good enough to keep this family. She had spent so much of her life feeling unwanted, so much time expecting people to leave. Maybe if she did something wrong, Sarah and Tom would change their minds. She started testing the limits. It began with small things. Ignoring their questions, leaving her shoes in the middle of the hallway instead of putting them away, forgetting to do her homework even though she always loved school. When they gently reminded her, she just shrugged. Then, one afternoon, she deliberately knocked over a glass of juice at the dinner table. It spilled across the wooden surface, dripping onto the floor. Sarah and Tom looked at each other, then at her. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sarah said, grabbing a napkin. Emma blinked. "You're not mad?" "Of course not," Tom said. "It was an accident." Emma's heart pounded. It hadn't been an accident. She had wanted to see if they would snap, if they would yell, if they would send her away. Over the next few days, she pushed further. She skipped brushing her teeth before bed. She refused to eat her vegetables at dinner, even though she usually didn't mind them. She didn't say goodnight. Each time, Sarah and Tom responded with patience. One evening, as Emma sat curled up in the living room, Sarah sat beside her. "Emma," she said gently, "is something wrong?" Emma shook her head, refusing to meet her eyes. "Are you worried that we're going to change our minds?" Emma's breath hitched. Sarah reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Emma's ear. "No matter what you do, no matter what happens, we're not going anywhere." Emma looked up at her, tears burning at the back of her eyes. "But what if I mess up?" she whispered. Sarah pulled her into a warm hug. "Sweetheart, families don't stop loving each other because of mistakes. We love you because you're you, not because you're perfect." Emma's body shook as she finally let go of the wall she had been holding up. She clung to Sarah, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Tom walked in and saw the scene, his face softening. "How about some ice cream?" he offered, trying to lighten the mood. "I hear ice cream makes everything better." Emma let out a small laugh through her sniffles. That night, as she lay in bed, she no longer felt the need to test them. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't going to leave after all. Months passed, and life began to settle into a beautiful rhythm. Emma thrived at school, made friends, and even started writing in a journal, something Sarah had suggested to help her process her feelings. One day, after school, she sat on the porch, flipping through an old notebook she had brought from the orphanage. Inside were faded doodles and scribbled words, memories of a time when she had still believed her parents would come back for her. As she turned a page, something slipped out and fluttered onto her lap. It was a letter she had written long ago, but never sent. It was addressed to her parents. "Dear Mom and Dad, I don't know where you are, but I miss you. I keep waiting for you to come back, but I'm starting to think maybe you're not coming. Everyone here tells me that you're gone, but I don't want to believe them. I don't like the orphanage, it's too quiet at night, and the blankets don't smell like home. The other kids don't talk to me much. Sometimes I dream about you. I dream that we're all together again, laughing and watching movies. But when I wake up, it's just me. I don't know what I did wrong, but if you can come back, I promise to be really good. I won't ask for extra bedtime stories or more ice cream. I'll be the best kid ever. Please, if you can come back, I love you. Emma." Her hands shook as she read the words, the desperate hope of a child who hadn't understood that some goodbyes were forever. She pressed the letter to her chest, breathing deeply. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they weren't just tears of sadness. She had a home now, she had a family, but it didn't mean she had to stop missing them. That evening she brought the letter to Sarah and Tom. "Can I show you something?" she asked hesitantly. Sarah took the letter, her expression softening as she read it. When she finished, she looked up at Emma, her eyes glistening. "Oh, sweetheart." Emma bit her lip. "Is it okay that I still miss them?" Tom nodded. "Of course it is. You'll always carry them with you." Emma exhaled, a small weight lifting from her chest. That weekend, Sarah and Tom took her to a park with a small pond, a place where she could sit quietly and say what she needed to say. Emma held the letter in her hands, staring at the water. "I think I have to let this go," she whispered. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "Only if you're ready." Emma nodded. Then, with one last deep breath, she placed the letter in the water and watched as it floated away, carried gently by the current. As the paper drifted out of sight, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. She turned to Sarah and Tom and smiled. "Let's go home." And for the first time in forever, she truly believed that home was real. Want more? Check out the video on screen for another amazing story, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our newest content.